Hi, I'm David Ware with the Arkansas State Archives, and I'm here with our curator, Julianne Crawford. We're talking today about genuine Arkansas eccentric in many ways, Louis Cornell Gully. And I first learned about this, Julianne told me about this fellow years ago, and she explained to me that really the History Commission, which is today's State Archives, of course, its main collections was built on his collecting enthusiasm for things old, things Arkansoyer, and as you see here, things connected with the Great War, the World War I.
Well, L.C. Gully was very important with the Arkansas History Commission in our early foundings. He gave us some great collections. One is a collection of material related to early Arkansas, and then he also gave us a World War I collection. He was born in Jacksonport, and he grew up in Arkansas, went to the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville.
Yeah. Did a law degree, didn't he?
Yes, he got a degree in law. And then he worked some various jobs until he kind of fell into the Postal Service, working for the Postal Service. But one of the jobs he had along the way was he was clearing out some of the paper from the old State House.
That's right. The State House had a wet cellar, and so they had, from what I've read, they had just piles of government documents, old publications, and he did a deal basically to clear it out and sell the stuff as pulp scrap, right?
Yes. And so as he was loading everything up to be shipped off to St. Louis, he was going through the documents and pulling some select few items. And so he pulled things that were early statehood and territorial documents and gave them to us.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of the first people that came to the Arkansas History Commission and said that I've got a collection for you. He had actually had sent a letter to John Reynolds, who was in charge as the first secretary of the Arkansas History Commission in about 1906, talking about this wonderful collection, and then we received it in 1911.
Yeah, and I've got the finding aid for it here. And 800 manuscript items plus printed materials, correspondence, legal documents, printed materials. How he was able to actually pick these things out while he's pitching stuff out into a rail car to send to a pulp plant. This guy was expert or slightly crazy, maybe a little bit both.
He was, and he just had a collector's bug in him, that he was a collector of many things. He had a good eye for collecting things.
Yeah.
And so he just kind of looked through the documents, I think, as he was going through them. Some of the territorial ones have to do with Native Americans that were being removed from their lands. It has early politicians, governors' records in there.
So this is one of the foundations of our manuscript collection.
Yes.
And so thank you, Louis Gully. But then we have something totally different, the World War I collection. Now,
yes.
What's going on here?
Well, L.C. Gully worked for the Postal Service. He was a postmaster in North Little Rock, and he also worked in Little Rock. And during World War I, he joined up and became with the Postal Service in France, delivering to the troops. And while he was in France, then he was going across all these battlefields, and he started collecting items. And he collected over 50 bags, the U.S. Postal Service bags, full of artifacts that he sent back to the Arkansas History Commission. And then our director at that time, Dallas Herndon, he turned it into a museum. We already had a museum under us, the Arkansas History Museum, and then we created this World War I Great War Museum.
Yeah. Now, where was it wasn't a freestanding museum, was it?
No, it was in the state capitol. It was a very impressive collection of items.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the only collection, actually, that was housed at the state capitol for a while. He also got over 30,000 minerals, rocks, and things that he gave to the state that were also exhibited.
Which ended up being the Geological Commission's collection.
Yes. So he was involved with that. And then even after he moved from Arkansas, he was still collecting and hoping to come back and give us additional things.
Yeah.
He actually moved on to Hawaii, working with
right.
the Postal Service, and then he settled in California.
Mhm.
He started a hobby museum there that was working with children to try to get them involved in museums of starting their own collections.
Right.
But even in the 1930s, he was writing about how he wanted to send things back to us at the Arkansas State History Museum under the Arkansas History Commission.
Yeah. Now what we have here is probably one of the bigger artifacts he sent back. I'm thinking that's an awfully big post office bag that would contain this. But you know, one of the most typical battlefield souvenirs is some sort of firearm, if you can get one. I know my father tried to bring back a Japanese machine gun from Okinawa after World War II. They made him throw it off the boat before they docked in California. But this one obviously made it through, and this one, there's a story to tell here. I think the story is, make sure you don't have your barrel plugged before you try to fire it, right? This is a model 1917 Enfield rifle. This was one of the two rifles that was issued to American troops during the Great War. The other one was the famous Springfield rifle. This model had started off life actually as a British design that was being made by several American arms manufacturers under contract to the English. When the United States entered the war in 1917, they modified it slightly to take the American cartridge and sent tens of thousands of these out to servicemen who were going overseas to fight in the last years of World War I. And this one, as you can see, it's a little bit the worse for wear. You're not supposed to have one of these on your barrel. What probably happened here was that the poor serviceman fired it without checking to see whether or not the barrel was clear. Gully's notes note that the man was severely injured when he tried to fire this. If he had his hand around it, like I can imagine. But it is a remarkable example of a battlefield relic. I'm glad he collected it. Now Gully sent other fairly gruesome relics back too, didn't he?
He did. He was really going through the battlefields and just picking things up off of the battlefields, and sometimes they were all muddy, and just anything that he could find that he thought would be significant to preserve for history. And we're very fortunate that he had preserved them and sent them back to us.
Yeah. When I've looked through his collection, some of the remarkable things, there are pieces of armor with bullet holes in them. Then you have little fragments from churches that were destroyed by shell fire. From the very obviously military down to the very touching personal relics. He collected it all. He was gifted, and we are much the richer for his collecting reflex, his mania, his expertise. He died in 1946 out in California. He never came back to Arkansas after the war, it doesn't sound like. At least not to stay, but his legacy lives on.
Yes.
And we're proud to have that available for people to enjoy, both in exhibits and as reference documents. At the Arkansas State Archives, we preserve Arkansas's past, 200 years of collections and a lot more, and it's all here for you to explore. Thank you.